Who's JavaScript developer here? Okay, well, who's not? You're not? Okay, well, you're gonna get bored, sorry. Okay, the only thing about me, thanks Jay, I'm gonna go straight away, and I'm gonna start the nerd right away. Who uses evaluation in the code? Okay, who hates it? Okay, so in a lot of frameworks, including such evaluation is actually needed. In Next.js, evaluation is commonly used with JSON data or older browsers that do not support native JSON parsing. There are also web applications that try to do something very special to make them move faster. So they render a bunch of views or parts of views on the server side, sending over the client side so the client side can parse it. Actually, this came after a client of ours that needed something like that. They were working with very old computers, 486, and needed something very fast. So they figured out it can be very fast with evaluation. So actually, there's two ways. One is evaluation proof, and the other one is actually creating a new function with the same string inside. And this is a performance benefit. Obviously, Chrome is 54 times faster with evaluating using new functions. So, kind of all the other browsers follow the same habit, including Internet Explorers. Kind of cool thing to know if you happen to have this need for evaluation.
I'm sorry, higher is better.
Good question, thanks. This is based on JS performance benchmarks. Okay, the number is operations per second. Okay. I did it using benchmark.js framework, which is the same thing that runs on jsperf.com. And there's another cool thing to mention. Benchmarks should not be taken for granted. Things happen in benchmarks. Benchmarks are just single use cases. And I'm going to show this here. I kind of fooled myself with one example, thinking that something's going to be faster. But it's only faster in a certain condition. There is another thing. Chrome has very good caching mechanism. And actually, when repeating the same thing over again, it's actually going to use cached information. Okay, so kind of Chrome is a little bugger here. This is the example. String concatenation. We usually do one of the three. The kind of old school way, the Crockford way, and array.join, the essential way. Array.join, we usually use in X templates, those of you who deal with essential a lot. And it's often the fastest. However, not in every browser. Firefox actually does not honor the speed as Chrome, and Internet Explorer and Safari kind of mix and match. The other way of doing that is using string concat method. Okay. Check this out. Safari 93 million versus 1 million. It's quite an improvement. However, this holds true for a single string concatenation. So if I'm adding a string to a string, it's add members or new strings, it gets ridiculously slower. Okay, another gotcha. It's always faster on Safari. Mobile Safari and in desktop Safari. Let me see the. Hold on. Okay, talk about that. This is example. Array method versus concat method. If you're developing only for iOS, and in templates like this, I guess concat is going to be good enough. If you work for something that can be cross-platform, definitely use arrays. The concat in mobile Safari is not that faster. Okay, makes sense? Questions? No questions? All right. Loops. Which is faster? Who's for loop? Raise your hand. And who says while is faster? Okay, so either you've been reading old materials or you're old school. Okay? Here's the result. For loop is going to be faster in new browsers, and while is going to be faster usually in Internet Explorers. Okay, this is this exact example. Okay, I'm always assigning A to 1 so that we don't have a lot of noise in the benchmark. This is the result. All right, it's just iteration for a certain number of times. Any questions so far? All right.
Can you look at it with for each?
Would it have anything to do with the minus?
No, it's math. It's minus.
Is that because it's just, you're not doing anything complicated in the for loop, so it can unroll it really easily?
I'm not doing anything complicated in while.
You aren't, but I mean, if you were to add just something that's slightly more complicated, which one would be faster? I mean, not that I'm saying you're wrong, because
I agree. Well,
it's always pretty close.
so I guess why don't you try and send us feedback? So yeah, this is a simple loop that just does something for a certain number of times. Okay. If I added something more complicated to the for loop, then we would actually be benchmarking the loop and the complication aside. Right?
Not necessarily.
Well, what do you mean by complicated?
Well, the problem is that browsers have gotten to the same thing as like video games and OSs, where they build in optimizations to try to block benchmarking to some extent. So if you don't, and it's a good thing that they do this, but they try to unfold logic and they try to just predict what the output's going to be. So if it's static,
Yeah.
they're going to try to do that.
Sure. So still, I'm saying if you do something more kind of complicated side, you're kind of adding noise to the benchmark, and maybe Chrome is better at catching something, virtual machine, whatever is inside, versus Firefox. Maybe Firefox is not as good at that, and then we're going to say we're going to have disordered results. Make sense?
Yeah.
Was there another question?
What are you using for measuring the performance?
Benchmark.js.
Benchmark.
Yeah. So this is again, every chart is in benchmark.js, means operations per second. Okay. And if you want to know the machine is this one, it's MacBook Pro, i7 2.2 gigs, 8 gigs of RAM, 2.2 gigahertz, and 8 gigs of RAM. All right. Yeah, given Internet Explorer is in virtual machine, it's parallel 7. Just so you know. Loops, yeah. Nested object properties. Actually, it makes a lot of sense too. Instead of accessing each object's nested property, remember, it actually makes sense to cache them. If you have uncached version versus cache. This is a method out of the blue, just a made-up method. The point is to show how browsers like is easier with shallow approach, which was the bottom one. Okay, this is how much. Chrome actually shows that it's a huge difference. Reusing array references. Who knows how to reuse array references? Someone. Okay, it's a pretty cool deal. Basically, if you need to work with a lot of arrays and those that come later can have to be kind of instantiated later, and might actually use a reference of an older array, are very beneficial. This is how it's done. You create an array, you use it, and you destroy it by setting array.length equals 0. And then you push items into the array. Okay? So you need to have an array that you can actually destroy. It doesn't make sense just to create an array for destroying. It makes sense if you have one and you can reuse that same reference. You are reusing the same memory block. This is how faster it is in Chrome.
So you're reusing the same variable that you might have used for something else?
It's not variable, it's reference.
But that's what it would look like in your
Yes,
code, though.
yes. You have array, you're done with it, disposed. However, instead of getting a new one, and you have one that is obsolete, just set it to length 0.
For some entirely different purpose, potentially.
Yes, exactly.
That has to do mostly with the hash allocation? Is it because of the hash allocation?
Well, I really, honestly, do not know what happens in memory, and I guess it makes sense.
Doesn't your graph, I thought your graph shows the opposite. Doesn't it show that who
Yeah, you're
equals
right.
new arrays is
You're right.
significantly
Actually, you're right. Thank you.
Okay, cool. I'm
Thank
not
you.
going crazy.
Thank you. Yeah,
I
did
think
read
that
it
was the
right.
other way to do it. That's pretty
True. It's super slow in Chrome, but it's actually twice as fast, almost twice as fast as Safari.
But these are both ways of reusing the same. They're just two different techniques for reusing.
cool. No, I think the,
The
first
one is creating a new reference.
It's creating a new array and storing it under the same name.
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually highlights like how why V8 is awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, blows everybody away.
It also highlights, and we're going to see this more in these examples, that sometimes we need to be browser aware. Okay? Lots of frameworks do that. All right. This is actually the same chart. However, I kind of separated these in separate images so that the 221 million does not interfere with these small numbers, just to see the ratio. Okay? And this is desktop Safari versus mobile Safari. In favor of reusing array references. Okay, overusing closures. That's pretty straightforward. In this example, we have a callback, probably an asynchronous AJAX callback or event callback, similar. This one has a nice interesting loop that recreates a function with every loop. That's cool if it's needed. It's often actually easier to cache a function with declaration in a reference. Okay, but this is often the case. Okay. This one is, again, probably heard about it a lot. And it just sort of breaks at me if I use onClick. It's only to kind of use as much space as possible and not use that listener and stuff and all those new cool things. And this is not a good way to add emphasis. Anyways, in this example, we have a bunch of list items inside of an unordered list. We are creating an event listener for each list item. Not the greatest of ideas, since every event actually costs a lot in browser memory. One thing that happens in mobile browsers that have limited browser memory is they actually crash when they succeeded, and that is not observed as browser crash, it's observed as application crash. So the proposed method is called event delegation. We re-listen to the whole thing. And again, I have a typo here, it's not menu, it's not. We listen to the whole thing, and we try to use JavaScript to find out which list item was clicked on. And based on that, it's kind of if and then forwarding, delegating to their callbacks. Questions? Okay. This one's real cool. Timers in JavaScript. First of all, JavaScript is single-threaded. Means everything happens in a single thread, no parallel interaction. Okay, everything has to happen in order. There's a queue. Timers are not only used to defer an action and should not be used to defer an action because they are unreliable. Every browser and every operating system has its own kind of bugs and noise with timers. For example, IE6 on Windows XP cannot have a lower timer than around 200 milliseconds. Okay, so it can execute something in 1 millisecond, no way. However, timers can help to kick something out of the execution thread to the end of the queue. So we are simulating main JavaScript code execution in this example. That right about the beginning of it has a 10 millisecond timer that executed. Okay. So this timer only exists in memory as a timeout. Okay. Screen got resized, and we actually have a callback for a screen that got resized. And that callback is immediately pushed after the main JavaScript code execution. Timer 1 has expired, but it can't actually happen here because something is happening. So it gets pushed to the bottom. And we have that happening all the time. In such too, this is very useful to know to defer unselection of a selected list item, for example. You can't unselect immediately after selection. For example, tap on the list item, show a new view, and deselect. You actually have to defer it by at least 1 millisecond. Also very useful because these gaps can be used for user interface. User interface needs some time to render, to show, to interact with the user. And if we split longer operations into several chunks using set timeout, the application becomes much more active, interactive. Please. Yeah. Responsive. Okay. Adding elements to DOM. Let's say this is kind of a similar thing. Let's say we want to add a lot of DOM elements to document. So give me the ways to do that. Someone with JavaScript? Anyone?
You append nodes.
Okay, append node. How do you create a node?
You call document.create.
Okay. All right. Let's see. This one.
Yes.
All right. Create element, append child. That is another create element. Create text node, append child. All right. Any other?
Document dot write.
What's that?
Document dot write.
Document what?
Write.
Well,
And you can
not
write HTML.
not really. Something similar to that, possibly. Anyone? In HTML, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In HTML? Okay. Is this in HTML? Hold on. Say again, did I use in HTML?
Yeah.
Oh, this was in HTML. Cool.
But you could create all the text instead of, and then do just one concat into the HTML.
So
Oh, that's what you're doing.
this is probably this, right? Okay, so which is going to be faster?
Inner HTML.
Generally.
Why?
You're not appending a bunch of nodes at one after another. You're appending.
Okay.
You're not transversing the tree.
The rendering would happen only once.
Okay. Okay. So, okay, why is that there to happen like once and not with every node?
I think every node it will add the node, render the view, add the node, render.
Like reflow and calculation of the sizes.
Okay, reflow, repaint. Okay, any other reason? Dude, just say.
Building of the DOM is slow
Okay, why?
because all the object creation is required.
Okay,
Check for events.
so why?
All the events, because
You don't want traffic.
the DOM changes.
The DOM calls more data than it needs to.
Well, we also have this whole communication pattern between JavaScript and WebKit and that layout rendering engine, which is very costly. So in the second, here we only have one, actually. In the second example, we have we communicate to WebKit once, second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time, sixth time, for the same thing. Communication is super expensive. I don't know if you have ever tried to test a loop that does console.log versus the one that does not.
Yeah.
And this one can be super fast, super slow with console.log because of all the extra communication. Okay? Is there a third way of adding DOM nodes? Anyone? No? Of the third way?
CSS content.
That's a cool way, I like that. But it needs pseudo classes before and after.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's limited. You can add one item. Or actually two, before and after. Anything else? Sencha? How does Sencha Touch add elements to DOM?
I haven't looked into it.
Okay. Anyone heard of document fragments?
Yeah, but I thought that was mainly Mozilla.
No.
I know they were the ones that heavily used it. They recommended it.
Well, yeah. Well, they created JavaScript too.
But it's like, you know, that's why they recommended it versus like IE6. Like you had to do it the other way. So. But.
Okay. Well, creating document fragments is actually a lot faster. And there's two ways to do that. One is kind of replication of the old way. Am I on the same way? Oh no, this is a clone node. Okay, going back. Sorry. We can create that whole element once and use clone node true. We actually just clone that create the element, which is pretty fast. We just do that. And the most kind of the coolest way or the fastest way is create a document fragment, and then out of the fragment, use clone node. Okay? This is the way Sencha Touch renders things on screen. Things.
So is it cross-browser? Fragment?
It is. There are different ways of using using document fragment. I actually do not know by heart for IE6, but there is two ways of using this. Okay. Actually, I think I have it. It works in IE7. I'm not sure about IE6. This one is going to be much faster. Let's take a look. There is a lot of bars here. In HTML, the first one is the blue bar. Not very performant. Actually, almost every browser has a nice little line as you come over upwards, meaning it gets faster as we approach document fragment, other than Safari 5.1. It's actually Safari 6. Just take a look at it, read it to you. Download node and document fragment to be probably comparing. Okay. All right. Next, well, do you have any questions?
HTML is always the slowest?
Say again?
So HTML is always the slowest?
It's not always so close. Take a look at Opera.
Oh, I see, okay.
Firefox.
Yeah, Firefox is better than that.
I think it also depends on the version. I mean, HTML used to be significantly faster.
Yeah.
You know, 2 years ago.
Well,
but things have been advancing and people don't like it as much.
well, IE7 came more or less 2 years ago. It's kind of very small bar, but it's a little slower than this one. The first one, the Dom Pinchild. Well, maybe I did Dom Pinchild in their performing way, not like other people. I don't know. Maybe my way's faster. Any other questions? All right. This is a small little trick and leads me pretty well into CSS world. We have, obviously 2 ways of updating styles for an element. Target is the element we want to change styles for. If you only wanted to change one style, actually 2 is max, just about max. You can do it this way. If you have more styles to change, it's a lot faster. This goes along with an HTML thing. It actually goes a lot faster to use a string. A whole string with the whole thing as in a CSS class, and use target.style.css text. Not many people have you heard of CSS text property?
Does it overwrite all of the CSS properties when you do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Good question. Overrides everything.
Overwrites everything.
Oh, the whole CSS, the CSS tag of the target element, not CSS style sheet, just tag of that element.
So, if, for instance, here, if I had defined font for target element through the style,
Okay.
would that font go away because?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If you have a class name to this target, it's going to keep the class name.
Okay.
Okay, so it's going to inherit from CSS. This is a benchmark. Okay, it's a little fast on Chrome, a lot faster on Firefox. I'm sorry I didn't get to test this on other browsers. Selectors. I kind of like this. So anybody knows how browser selects using CSS selectors selects elements?
Remember?
How browsers read selectors?
Backwards.
Say again.
They read
What's
it
backwards?
So you
What's
start-
backwards to you?
Well, if you normally read left to right. They're going to read it right.
Yeah, exactly. There's 2 gotchas here. First, they read right to left, and second, well, do you like to define your selectors do you like to be very, very detailed in defining selectors? Or do you just specify maybe a class name? What's your favorite?
Class name.
Class name?
It's easier.
Do you do like div dot class name or parent and then space class name? Do you do a lot of those?
I typically don't use inheritance more because I don't know if suppose the same inheritance is unintentionally used somewhere else.
Okay.
It can run. So I generally use simple class names.
Good enough. Anyone else? No one? And who uses CSS selectors? Raise your hand. All right. Well, thanks for sharing your methods of selection. So which is faster? If you select by ID or by class name?
ID.
Tag or ID?
Tag right? Oh, still ID.
Okay. This shows several ways of using that HTML with CSS selectors. Okay, we have tag table, we have ID menu, we have class first. This is the first row, and then we try to complicate things. One that strikes me is that if we try to find direct descendants versus any descendant, it is actually slower. And in almost all cases, ID wins over tag. Well, ID score is obviously pretty cool browser. Any questions about it? Any questions in global? You want to hear more? Is it interesting? I paced this for 30 minutes, so. think I got a little bit more on Motorspade blog. Pretty much this recycled, but I added more information, especially for the Concat issue and stuff like that. So just visit the blog post. There's 2 posts, one about CSS and the other one about JavaScript. So you can go ahead if you wanna kind of go revisit the presentation again. It's all up there.
Would you say this is more like just kind of a method you should follow all the time and you'll see better results, or something that you could instantly, that you have to do on something in order for something you've worked on to perform well enough?
Are you talking about all of these optimizations?
Not necessarily all of them, but like any one of them, like let's say the CSS selectors.
Okay.
I mean, I know, for example, that it is that you can have slow selectors, but have you ever really seen one selector that was so bad that you could actually visually see it, or that your app was not working well because of that?
Is it really that much faster? Honestly, no, but I never saw a reason why create something to be slower if you can do that to be faster.
Oh, of course.
And it all adds up.
Well, that's kind of what I'm asking. I mean, if you're using the same, let's say you're using the same selector, a million times on a page, just like these examples, and it doesn't have to be selected. It could just be bad inner HTML or append child logic. Do you regularly run into when you're trying to work on a product that, oh, this is going a little slow, oh, it's because there's too much DOM writing right here, or this selector is causing too much reflow to occur too fast?
The second one happens quite often. Usually, well, I have a rule of thumb, I guess. I would love to share some of the projects I've worked with. For example, one of the projects in the auto industry with several screens. It has to be very, very performant, and yet has to keep a bunch of views in memory. And every single cycle counts in that application. These people have huge, busy interface, busy views, and it needs to be very smooth. Animations, a whole lot of stuff. So every cycle counts. So just do whatever I can. If it takes to do that for such an application that really needs high-end performance, I would even go and check for the browser to see which method to use, concatenation or index.join. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. If it's a simple application that I'm building out fun for iOS or application store, I guess I choose to be quick in development. Maybe cut 3 corners. Also, I take it you're all experienced with JavaScript and you know something. So you pass your kind of initial learning process, which is where most applications fail, in that learning process. If you know something, you probably look for that 20% extra. You know how speakers start cheap, then go expensive progressively, and then we have like $100,000 speaker, and then you just want to hear an extra instrument. You have to pay $500,000 more, to get just 5% better sound. That's kind of something like this. Make sense? Okay.
So have you tested in CSS if using a shortcut like font instead of font size, font style, and everything? Does font using just font,
Okay.
instead of and specifying everything in font instead of font weight as a separate attribute?
Oh, okay. Well, it depends on how you want to reuse your classes. For example, you have media queries to choose the vector, the sprite image. Okay. It makes sense to have an icon class that only has information of the sprite image. It's going to load the 2x or the 1x version, depending on regular display or non-regular display, for example. And then all your icons are going to have 2 classes. One is icon, and the other one has the background position property. Okay, so actually reuse a lot. Okay, it's not going to be that much slower, but your code is going to be much more maintainable. Okay. Another thing about good that you mentioned font. I had a case maybe last week or the one before where an application loaded, showed the screen, and it took a second until it actually showed font, showed text. Okay, you see buttons, you see stuff, but it taking another second to actually show the text. The issue was these people had 18 fonts in CSS. Okay, 18 fonts, each had 3 files. So it's not really necessary when you know the browser is going to be Safari. You can only use one font. And I also thought that Safari is only going to choose one that it's going to make use of. Okay, it's going to download one, but it actually downloads all 3 of them. And when you're 3G connection or worse, you have to wait until 18 times 3 files are loaded. Okay, and that can be a second or more. Okay. Cool. Any other questions? Do you want to eat more cold pizza? Hot beer?
Yeah, hot beer.